The dust storm swept across the Montana prairie like a vengeful spirit, forcing Virginia Stowe to shield her eyes as she trudged the final mile toward Redemption Springs. She was only 18, with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small satchel of belongings, and her mother's silver locket hanging from her neck. Her last dollar had gone to pay for the stagecoach that left her stranded 5 miles from town when a wheel broke. Now her boots rubbed blisters on her heels. Her throat burned with thirst, and every step forward felt heavier than the last. The year was 1875, and the West was still wild, untamed, and cruel, especially to a young woman traveling alone. Virginia clutched a crumpled letter from her late aunt's lawyer, the only proof she had of the property she'd inherited, a small boarding house her Aunt Margaret once ran in Redemption Springs. That inheritance was her last chance at a new beginning after losing her parents back east. As she crested the final hill, the town came into view. Redemption Springs looked nothing like the lively place her aunt's letters had described. The mining boom was long gone, leaving behind weathered buildings and quiet, dusty streets. A few horses stood hitched outside the saloon, and a handful of townsfolk moved about their business, but the place felt hollow, like it had forgotten how to hope. Virginia straightened her spine as she walked down the hill. The townspeople turned to stare, their gazes filled with curiosity and suspicion. She refused to let them see her fear. "You look lost, miss," a gruff voice called. Virginia turned to see an older woman with steel-gray hair standing in the doorway of the general store, arms crossed. "I'm looking for Stowe boarding house," Virginia said, her voice rough from thirst. The woman's brows lifted. "Stowe? You kin to Margaret Stowe?" "She was my aunt," Virginia replied. "I've inherited her property." A murmur rippled through the bystanders. The woman's expression hardened. "That place has been empty since Margaret passed 6 months ago." Falling apart too. Quote, "It's mine now," Virginia said, her voice trembling but steady. A man in a dusty black suit stepped forward. "I'm Mayor Hargrove," he said. "We weren't expecting anyone to claim that property. Thought it'd go to auction for taxes." Before Virginia could respond, the sound of hoofbeats filled the street. A tall man on a chestnut stallion rode in, commanding every eye as he dismounted with easy grace. His hat shadowed his face, but his presence was unmistakable, steady, powerful, dangerous in a quiet kind of way. "What's all this about?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. "This young lady claims to be Margaret Stowe's niece," the mayor explained. "Says she's here to take over the boarding house." The cowboy's blue eyes studied Virginia, sharp but not unkind. He tipped his hat. "Jacob Yates," he said. "I own the ranch north of town." "Virginia Stowe," she replied. "The boarding house hasn't seen a guest in months," Jacob said, roofs leaking, porch sagging. "Folks were planning to tear it down and build another saloon." Virginia lifted her chin. "Then it's a good thing I arrived when I did." Mayor Hargrove sighed. "Miss Stowe, this town isn't exactly welcoming to women running businesses on their own. You might be better off selling the property and returning east." "I have nowhere to return to," Virginia said firmly. "The boarding house is all I have left, and I intend to make it work." Laughter erupted from a group of men lounging outside the saloon. "A slip of a girl like you," one called. "You'll be gone in a week." Another woman in a bright red dress leaned against the doorway. "You don't belong here, sweetheart," she said with a smirk. "This town eats proper ladies alive." Heat rushed to Virginia's cheeks as their laughter grew. Tears threatened, but she held her ground. "They said I'd never belong," she whispered under her breath, her voice cracking. Then a shadow fell across her. Jacob Yates stepped forward, his tall frame blocking the sneers and laughter. His expression softened, his eyes kind. "You belong with me always," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. Then, facing the crowd, he raised his voice. "That's enough. The lady's got as much right to a new start as anyone here." The street went silent. The mayor cleared his throat. "Very well, Miss Stowe, I'll have the deed ready tomorrow, but I warn you, it won't be easy." Jacob nodded to her. "I'll escort Miss Stowe to her property," he said. "No lady should walk alone in this wind." Virginia wanted to protest, but her exhaustion won. "Thank you, Mr. Yates," she said softly. They walked together down the quiet street as curious eyes followed them. The old boarding house stood at the far end of town, its paint peeling, its porch sagging, its windows thick with dust. "It's rough," Jacob admitted, tying his horse to the post. "But your aunt built this place with heart. It has good bones." "You knew her?" Virginia asked. Jacob nodded. "Everyone did. She made the best apple pie in Montana and never turned away a traveler, kept this town alive when the mines went dry." Inside, the house was dim and dusty. Sheets covered the furniture, and cobwebs hung like curtains. But beneath the decay, Virginia saw promise. Oak floors, a stone fireplace, sturdy walls. "She had 6 guest rooms upstairs," Jacob said. "Kitchen's out back. Water pump still works, and there's a small garden. Overgrown now, but not lost." Virginia wandered through the rooms, touching the old wood railings and faded wallpaper. She found a framed photograph of her aunt, a woman smiling proudly, eyes full of kindness. "Thank you for giving me this chance," Virginia whispered. When she returned, Jacob had removed his hat. He looked younger, more human. "It's a lot to take in," he said. "But I can help you get started. I've got men who can fix the roof and porch before the next rain." "I can't pay you," Virginia said, embarrassed. "Call it a loan," Jacob replied with a faint smile. "You can repay me by feeding my ranch hands when they're in town. Your aunt's cooking spoiled us all." Virginia hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Jacob's eyes darkened with something she couldn't name. "Because I know what it's like to be told you don't belong." Before she could respond, gunfire shattered the calm. Men on horseback stormed into town, shouting and firing into the air. Jacob's face hardened. "The Caldwell gang," he muttered. "Stay inside." "Lock the door." As he strode out to meet them, Virginia watched from the window, her heart pounding. The gang leader, a scarred man with cruel eyes, faced Jacob in the street. The two exchanged words too low to hear, but the tension was sharp as lightning. Then, after a long moment, the outlaw laughed, slapped Jacob's shoulder, and led his men into the saloon. When Jacob returned, dust clinging to his coat, he said simply, "They'll be gone by morning. This town has no sheriff. Folks just endure until trouble rides on." Virginia looked around the empty house, realizing how much she didn't yet understand about this wild, broken place. Jacob met her gaze, steady and sure. "That's why I want to help you," he said quietly. "Redemption Springs needs people who'll stay. People like you." Virginia didn't answer. She only nodded, feeling something warm stir in her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, she could belong here after all. The morning sun poured through the cracked windows of the Stowe boarding house, washing the dusty rooms in gold. Virginia stirred awake on a worn mattress in her late aunt's room, the faint smell of smoke and whiskey drifting from town. Her body ached from exhaustion, but her spirit felt strangely alive. She was here. She had survived her first night in Redemption Springs. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She hurried to wrap her shawl around her shoulders before opening it. "Morning, Miss Stowe," came Jacob's deep voice. "I brought help." Standing beside him were 2 men in a wagon full of lumber and supplies. "These are my hands, Hank and Thomas. They can fix most anything." Virginia blinked in surprise. "Mr. Yates, this is generous. I don't even know what to say." Jacob gave a small smile. "Say yes. Let us fix that roof before it falls on your head." Quote, the men got to work unloading the wagon while Jacob led Virginia into the kitchen. Dust covered every surface, but beneath it all, the room felt warm, almost familiar. He pumped the handle at the old sink until a trickle of clear water flowed. "Your aunt's stove still works," he said. "And the well's fine. She used to cook meals for half the town in this kitchen." Virginia smiled faintly, tracing her hand along the worn counter. "I'm not half the cook she was, but my mother taught me enough to get by." "That's good," Jacob said. "You'll need it." Folks here remember her pies more than her name. As the hours passed, the boarding house began to change. Hammering echoed through the rooms. Sunlight replaced shadows, and laughter. Real laughter filled the air. Virginia cleaned what she could, her hands raw and her heart steady. By noon, she had coffee brewing on the stove and bacon sizzling in a pan. When she called the men to eat, they came in smelling of sawdust and sweat. "Best meal I've had in months," Hank said through a mouthful of beans. "Wait till I've got proper supplies," Virginia replied, smiling for the first time since she'd arrived. Jacob watched her quietly from the corner. "See?" he said. "Told you this place could come alive again." Just as they were finishing, the sound of boots on the porch made Virginia glance toward the door. Mayor Hargrove entered, hat in hand, eyes darting around the room. "I see you've been busy, Miss Stowe." "Yes, sir," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The repairs are coming along nicely." The mayor laid a folded paper on the table. "Here's the deed to the property, as promised, but you should know there are 6 months of back taxes due, quite a sum." Virginia's heart sank. "I have nothing left," she admitted softly. "I'll cover it," Jacob said before she could speak again. "Add it to her account with me." The mayor's brows rose. "That's a sizable amount, Mr. Yates. If you're investing in the property, perhaps your name should be added to the deed." "No," Jacob interrupted sharply. "It's Miss Stowe's home. My help is a loan, not ownership." Quote. After the mayor left, Virginia turned to Jacob, her eyes filled with frustration. "You shouldn't have done that. I already owe you more than I can repay." Jacob leaned against the doorframe, calm and steady. "Mayor Hargrove's been trying to buy this place for months. He wants to tear it down and put up another saloon. I couldn't let that happen." "You care that much about this town?" she asked softly. "I have a stake in it," Jacob said. "My ranch depends on Redemption Springs surviving, and it can't survive on whiskey and gambling alone." Virginia looked around the half-repaired room, imagining what it could become. "Then maybe this place can help rebuild it," she said quietly. Jacob smiled faintly. "That's what your aunt believed, too." Over the next few days, Virginia worked from dawn till dusk alongside Jacob and his men. They replaced the broken boards, mended the roof, and cleared the garden out back. Word spread quickly that the old Stowe boarding house was being restored, and curiosity turned to something new: respect. One morning, when Virginia stepped outside, she found a small group of townspeople waiting. Edith Turner from the general store stepped forward with a determined look. "Your aunt helped many of us when times were hard," she said. "We thought it was time we returned the favor." Behind her stood the Reverend, the blacksmith, and even a few miners who had once rented rooms from Aunt Margaret. They came with tools, paint, and baskets of food. "I can't pay you," Virginia said, overwhelmed. "We're not asking for payment," Edith replied. "We're asking to help." By afternoon, the air buzzed with energy. The walls were scrubbed clean, the windows shined, and the garden began to show life again. Virginia moved among them, thanking each person, feeling something she hadn't felt since her parents died: belonging. When the day's work was done, Jacob lingered behind as the others left. He stood on the newly repaired porch, hammer in hand, his hat pushed back. "You did good today," he said. "You mean we did," Virginia replied, smiling. "I can't believe how kind everyone's been." Quote, "They remember your aunt's heart," Jacob said, "and they see her in you." Virginia hesitated, watching him in the fading light. "You've done more for me than anyone here. I don't know why." Jacob looked out toward the horizon, where the sun dipped behind the mountains. 5 years ago, I rode into this town with nothing but my horse and a bad reputation. Your aunt gave me a place to stay and never asked questions. She believed in second chances. I owe her everything." His honesty softened her. "Then maybe helping me is your way of repaying her kindness," she said gently. "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe it's because I see that same fire in you, the kind that keeps a person fighting when the world says they don't belong." Virginia's breath caught. His words reached deep, stirring something she didn't understand yet. "Stay for supper," she said impulsively. Jacob smiled. "If you're cooking, I'll risk it." They ate simply beans, bread, and hot coffee. but the conversation flowed easily. Virginia learned Jacob had built his ranch from the ground up, starting with nothing. He learned she'd come from Boston after losing her parents and her position at the school where she'd worked. By the time the lamps burned low, both felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. When Jacob finally stood to leave, Virginia followed him to the door. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For believing in me when no one else did." He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "You didn't need my belief, Virginia. You just needed a place to stand." And with that, he tipped his hat and disappeared into the night. As she watched him ride away, Virginia realized she was no longer afraid of Redemption Springs. For the first time, she felt like this broken town, and perhaps one man within it, might just become her home. The night wind swept across the plains, carrying the faint scent of rain and smoke from the distant hills. Virginia couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her sit up, listening for hoofbeats, wondering if Jacob had made it home safely. She finally drifted off near dawn, only to be jolted awake by a hard knock at the door. She hurried to answer it, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Jacob stood there, dusty and smiling faintly, a wagon behind him stacked with supplies. "Morning, Miss Stowe," he said. "I brought more boards, fresh paint, and some flour. And coffee, always coffee." Virginia blinked, half relieved, half startled. "You didn't need to." He cut her off gently. "Yes, I did. This place is becoming something worth saving." That day, the boarding house came alive again. Jacob's men repaired the last of the upstairs rooms, while Virginia scrubbed the floors until the wood gleamed. By evening, she had fresh curtains hung, the stove polished, and pies cooling on the window ledge. When the mayor walked in uninvited, expecting to see a ruin, he found something else entirely. "I'll be damned," he muttered. "You've done it." Virginia smiled. "It's only the beginning." News of the reopening spread fast. By the end of the week, travelers were arriving off the stagecoach, and townsfolk came by just to eat Virginia's biscuits and coffee. The laughter that had vanished from Redemption Springs was coming back, and the once empty boarding house had become the heart of it all. When Jacob visited that night, he leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her bustle about the dining room. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "I think it's changed me," she replied, setting a plate of warm pie in front of him. "I didn't think I'd ever belong anywhere again." Jacob's gaze softened. "You do now." They shared supper together, their talk easy, filled with stories and quiet laughter. But before Virginia could thank him properly, a boy burst through the front door, breathless and pale. "Mr. Yates, the Caldwell gang, they're at your ranch. They said they'll burn it down if you don't show yourself." Jacob was on his feet in an instant, his expression hardening. "How many?" "5, maybe 6. "Stay inside and lock the doors," Jacob told Virginia, already reaching for his hat. "I'm coming with you," she said. "No," he snapped, his voice sharp but his eyes pleading. "They're dangerous. Promise me you'll stay put." Quote. She hesitated, then nodded, her stomach twisting. "Please, be careful." "I will." He hesitated at the door, then pressed a small revolver into her hand. "Keep this with you." And then he was gone, disappearing into the night. Virginia stood frozen, the revolver heavy in her trembling hand. She locked the doors, but no lock could silence her worry. She sat in her aunt's old chair by the window, staring toward the dark horizon where Jacob had ridden off. Every gust of wind made her flinch. Every distant sound made her heart race. When dawn finally broke, she could bear it no longer. She threw on her shawl and hurried to Edith Turner's store. "Have you heard anything?" she asked breathlessly. Edith's face was grave. "Rumor is there was a fight at the Yates ranch. Doc Stevens rode out before sunrise. Word is Jacob took a bullet." Virginia's blood ran cold. "I need to see him." "Best not," Edith warned gently. "He told Hank not to bring you there." Virginia lifted her chin. "Then I'll go myself." Quote. Within the hour, she was on horseback with Hank guiding her through the open plains. The closer they came to Jacob's ranch, the stronger the smell of smoke grew. One barn lay in charred ruin, black against the sky. The house stood intact, but the air carried the weight of violence. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Upstairs," Hank said, sighing. "He's mad as a hornet you're here." Virginia ignored him and climbed the stairs. She found Jacob sitting upright in bed, his shoulder bandaged, his face pale with pain. His jaw clenched when he saw her. "I told you to stay in town!" he growled. "I don't take orders well," she said softly, moving closer. "How bad is it?" Quote, "It's a flesh wound. Bullet grazed me. I've had worse." "Still alive then," she said with relief, setting down the basket she'd brought. "I made you stew." He blinked. "You rode all this way to feed me?" "I rode all this way because you matter to me," she said simply. Jacob stared at her for a long moment, his usual calm cracking. "You shouldn't care for a man like me, Virginia. You don't know what I was before I came here." "Then tell me," she said. He turned away, staring at the window. "I wasn't always Jacob Yates. I used to be Jesse Young. I rode with an outlaw gang in Colorado after the war. We robbed stagecoaches, hurt people who didn't deserve it. One job went bad, and a man almost died because of me. I ran until I found Redemption Springs. Your aunt was the only one who knew who I really was. She gave me work, a name, and a chance to start again." Virginia's heart ached for him. "And you've spent every day since trying to make up for it." He looked back at her, surprised. "You don't hate me?" "No, because the man who stood up for me that day in the street isn't the same man you used to be." For the first time, Jacob's eyes softened with something like hope. "You're a remarkable woman, Virginia Stowe." She smiled faintly. "And you're a stubborn man, Jacob Yates." She stayed at the ranch that night, cooking, cleaning, tending to him until he finally fell asleep. In the quiet of his home, she realized how deeply she'd come to care for him. Not just out of gratitude, but something far stronger. Over the next week, Jacob healed, and Virginia returned each day after seeing to her guests. Their time together became a rhythm, gentle, familiar, and full of unspoken emotion. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset spill fire across the hills, Jacob turned to her. "Virginia," he said slowly, "I meant what I said that day in town. You belong with me, always have." Her breath caught. "Jacob." He took her hand, his rough palm trembling slightly. "I love you. I don't have fancy words or promises, but I know I don't ever want to face another sunrise without you in it." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to." That Christmas Eve, beneath candlelight and pine boughs, they were married in the small church of Redemption Springs. The whole town gathered to watch the union of the girl who had once been told she didn't belong and the cowboy who gave her a home in his heart. When the music began, Jacob took Virginia's hands and pulled her close. "They said you'd never belong," he whispered with a smile. She laughed softly through her tears. "And you told them." Jacob leaned in, his voice warm and sure. "You belong with me always." Years later, as they sat together on the porch of their ranch watching the sun melt behind the mountains, the sound of their children's laughter drifting from the yard, Virginia rested her head on Jacob's shoulder. "I found my home," she murmured. Jacob kissed her hair. "You made one, darling, for both of us." And as the stars blinked awake above the wide Montana sky, the cowboy and the woman who had once been told she'd never belong sat together in peace, proof that sometimes the wildest places are where hearts find their forever home.